Welcome to Reason Workshop, Class 10 on the Redrum. We'll start out with a tour of the Redrum interface, then browsing and loading patches. Then we'll go over the drum channels of the Redrum, then the Redrum programmer. Then we'll go through edit steps, then shifting between patterns and banks with automation. Then we'll go through copy patterns to Reason sequencer tracks, and finally a test. So the Redrum interface is a drum machine that has 10 channels. Each one of those is a sampler. You can either browse and load samples in it, or you can sample directly to it. The master volume is to the left, that controls the master output of the whole Redrum. And you can either play these 10 drum modules on the first 10 keys of your keyboard from C1 to A1, or you can use this thing called the programmer, which is a step sequencer, kind of like a bouncing ball for each individual drum module. And the pads light up and you can press on those. All the drum modules will be synchronized. And you can store all those drum beats, hear 8 different patterns within 4 different banks, giving you a total of 64 different beats. You can of course copy the pattern to track so that you have it down here on your sequencer. On the back of it, you have master outputs, then you have send outputs. You also have individual breakout jacks of every single individual drum, which is a very common usage of it. Like if I just wanted a kick drum to come out that was on channel 1, I might create a mix channel here and then just take the output of that to that mix channel so that I have it on a separate fader and I can put effects just on that individual drum. Now that will no longer come out of the master output. Also there's gate output and gate input, which we'll go over in more detail when we do patching in the future. So now let's go over browsing and loading patches that you can load up. AIF, waves, or Rex slices. If you go into browse sample, you can go into your Redrum drum kits, and this is where a good portion of all the exclusive drums are here in the Redrum exclusive drums folder. You have your bass drums, you have your snare drums. These are where the patches are located. Now, browsing patches is done here. So that's where it pulls up patches that have all 10 drum modules loaded. If you go into samples, it won't show anything there. So you have to go here to load samples. Important to understand the difference of those. Now you can load in music loops or any sounds that you bring in outside of Reason. You can load in waves, AIFs, or the last file type I'll tell you about is Rex files. So you can go into some Dr. Rex drum loops, and if you're usually using an Octorex, that would automatically fit to your song tempo. But what's nice about using just slices of that is that all the cuts of those individual drums within the drum loop match each other's timbre perfectly. So I can load in several of those individual slices and make an entirely new beat out of that. Okay, so those are the individual slices. Let me just play something in using the keys. Now you can also save your kits. If you find a kit that you like, you can just hit save and bam, it will save for you. Now let's go over the drum channels. Now there are a few different kinds of drum channels, and we'll go over the differences, but first let's go over the similarities. They all have solo, mute, and trigger. They have sample or browse patch. So here, let's just browse a music loop, and let's go over the first 2 knobs, which are S1 and S2. I'm going to hold down Shift and create a RV7000 reverb, and take the send 1 to that reverb. And let's create a submix by making another mix channel for just the affected version. Now if I play that sample, you'll hear all the reverb on it. which is controlled by that S1. So that knob sends a percentage of the signal through that effect. So because you have S1 and S2, you could have two different effects to route percentage of audio on all 10 drum modules. Here's pan. That just controls the left and right panning of the stereo field. And then level, which just has to do with the volume. Velocity has to do with how hard you hit. To affect it less or more. All the way at 12 o'clock, it's just going to fire the same volume regardless of how hard you hit. The length is the next important thing. So if I turn the length all the way down, it's only playing a little bit of it. And the gate control is crucial. Check this out. So if I push the gate up to a hard cutoff, the second I take my finger off, it stops. And if I have it the other way, then it plays all the way through. It's a very musical effect to use with samples. And then we have the pitch. So those are found on every single Redrum module. Now we have a few different things. Here is the tone and velocity, which affects kind of like a notch filter to affect the brightness equalization. And you can have velocity to the harder that you hit, the brighter it will be. And that's the same thing for drum module 1 and 2. Let's check out the third drum module, and I'll load in the same loop just to be thorough. And on this module, you can control the sample start time with this knob. Modules 1 and 2 and 10 are all the same. Modules 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9 are the same. And now for modules 6 and 7, which are a little bit different. So again, we'll load in the same sample here. So you can actually create a bend effect on these drums. And you can have the velocity control the bend, the harder that you hit. And you can even put it to rate as well. So that's how drum modules 6 and 7 work. Now let's go over these other two buttons. High quality interpolation, you usually want that on. That keeps it at the highest quality audio. Channel 8 and 9 exclusive is a kind of interesting effect just for drum modules 8 and 9. So that controls like a gate on-off effect. I use it a lot with open hi-hats and closed hi-hats. So I'll use an open on 8 and a close on 9. So watch. On 8, I'll just keep it steady, 16ths, and 9, you can hear open hi-hats, but they still both trigger at the same time. If I turn this button on, you can hear 8 stops when 9 hits. Now let's go over the Redrum programmer. I have a patch loaded up, and I'll just press these pads, 1, 5, 9, and 15 for the hi-hat. And let's put it at 88 BPM. Let's try a few different sounds. So on 8, put 1 on 4, 1 on 12. Now let's change it to shuffle. 1 on 15. Now let's put some snares on here. 5. And now let's put another one. So you can hear how all these different step sequencers are happening simultaneously. finally for the kick. And what's cool is if you go in the edit menu, you can actually copy that pattern and then paste it. So let's go into pattern 2 and paste that pattern in. And this time, let's make something a little bit longer. So I want to go over edit steps. So here's your edit steps 1 through 16. Now, if you want to move up, this is like your second measure in a way. It's a 2-bar phrase. Edit steps 17 through 32 allow us to keep that second measure. And under steps, I have to push that to 32. So if you watch it, it goes through this whole measure, and then as I move the toggle up, it goes through the second measure. The LED just follows through from the first bar to the second bar. Now I'll make a third pattern here, and I'll take off all the hi-hats. And now let's copy that pattern and let's paste into the third pattern. And for this one, let's mute out all the kick drums. Now, if I want to record all the pattern automations, I can do that now. As simple as this. I'll start out on the 4th pattern, which is empty, so it gives silence. And then when I'm ready, press 3. And then when I'm ready, press 2. You always want to do that a little bit ahead of the beat. And then press 1. Then press 2 right before the downbeat. Or you can use copy patterns to track. So you just select copy pattern to track, and immediately it's going to put what you had on the internal sequencer of Redrum now printed down into MIDI data. So it always goes between your L and your R. So you can move your L and your R, which is, by the way, L stands for loop start, R stands for return. You move those to where your loop's going to be. You select your pattern and then copy the pattern to track, and bam, it shows up there. When you do that, you want to turn off enable pattern section playback. If you don't do that, then it will play the MIDI data on the sequencer as well as the sounds of the internal sequencer within Redrum. So if I turn it off now, we'll just hear the MIDI notes that are down here on the sequencer. So I resized it a little bit. Let's listen to the whole sequence.